Snow blanketed the bustling city, muffling the usual noise and casting everything in a serene white glow. But for Emma, it was just another reminder of how cold and isolating life could be. Once a lover of Christmas, she now viewed it as an inconvenience, an annual disruption to her carefully crafted routine as a marketing executive who barely had time to breathe, let alone celebrate. That night, Emma sat alone in her cozy but empty apartment, the faint twinkle of the Christmas lights she had grudgingly strung up doing little to warm her heart. She nursed a cup of hot cocoa, staring blankly at the snowflakes dancing outside her window, when her phone buzzed, another work email that she ignored. Memories of joyful Christmases past bubbled to the surface, the scent of fresh pine, the sound of laughter, and her parents' warm embrace. Those days felt like another lifetime, lost to the hustle of adult life. Unable to sit still, she grabbed her coat and ventured out into the snow-drenched streets, hoping to escape the weight of her solitude. The city was alive with holiday cheer, families and couples bustling past with rosy cheeks and arms full of gifts, but Emma felt like a ghost among them. As she wandered aimlessly, she stumbled upon a small Christmas market tucked into a side street she'd never noticed before, its warm glow beckoning her like a beacon. Intrigued, she stepped into the crowd, the air rich with the scent of roasted chestnuts and spiced cider. Amid the festive chaos, a quaint stall selling handmade ornaments caught her eye. She picked up a delicate glass star, its edges glinting like ice, and as she turned it over, a voice broke through her reverie. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a man said, his tone warm and inviting. Startled, she looked up to find a stranger with kind eyes and a slightly lopsided smile. He introduced himself as Lucas, a traveling artist who had a knack for being in the right place at the right time, or so he claimed. They exchanged polite conversation, and despite herself, Emma found his easy charm disarming. She learned he was new in town, visiting for a holiday exhibition and staying just long enough to soak in the city's Christmas magic. Lucas had an infectious enthusiasm for the season, something Emma hadn't felt in years. He teased her gently about her lack of Christmas spirit, which made her laugh for the first time in what felt like forever. Before parting ways, Lucas handed her a small wooden ornament he had carved himself, a miniature snowflake, and told her to consider it a token of the Christmas magic she seemed to have forgotten. As he disappeared into the crowd, Emma clutched the ornament tightly, feeling a warmth she couldn't quite explain. For the first time that evening, she smiled, a flicker of hope sparking within her. The next morning, Emma woke to the ornament Lucas had given her resting on her bedside table, its intricate design catching the sunlight streaming through her window. She turned it over in her hands, tracing the delicate grooves of the carved snowflake, and wondered why a brief encounter with a stranger had lingered in her mind. Shrugging off the thought, she went about her day as usual, meetings, presentations, and emails consuming her attention. Yet, by late afternoon, the memory of Lucas's warm smile and kind eyes tugged at her thoughts, urging her to visit the Christmas market again. That evening, curiosity won, and she found herself back in the glow of the bustling market. She wandered among the stalls, half expecting not to find him and half hoping she would. Just as she began to feel foolish for returning, she heard his voice. "Looking for another ornament?" Lucas teased, appearing at her side as if he'd known she would return. Emma tried to brush off her visit as coincidental, but her awkward laughter gave her away. Lucas didn't press. Instead, he invited her to walk with him through the market, his easy demeanor melting her initial discomfort. They moved from stall to stall, sharing little bits about their lives. Emma learned that Lucas's work as a traveling artist wasn't just about selling his creations. He saw it as a way to capture and share fleeting moments of beauty in a world that often overlooked them. "Every piece has a story," he said, holding up a hand-painted ornament. "Even the smallest things can hold magic if you look closely enough." Emma found herself opening up in a way she hadn't in years, confessing her struggles with balancing ambition and personal happiness. Lucas listened intently, his gaze steady and understanding. When she admitted she hadn't truly celebrated Christmas in years, he feigned shock, clutching his chest dramatically, which made her laugh despite herself. "We'll have to fix that," he declared, and before she could protest, he had whisked her away to a stall selling spiced cider. They clinked their steaming mugs together, and for the first time in ages, Emma felt the weight on her chest lift just a little. Over the next few days, they continued to meet at the market, their conversations growing deeper with each encounter. They discovered shared passions, art, books, and a mutual love for classic holiday movies, and revealed vulnerabilities they rarely shared with others. Emma was surprised to find Lucas wasn't just the carefree artist he appeared to be. He had his own scars, including a strained relationship with his family and a tendency to keep people at arm's length. Their bond deepened over late-night walks and stolen moments in the city's quiet corners, the festive lights casting a soft glow around them. One night, Lucas took Emma to an old chapel where a choir was rehearsing Christmas carols. The music filled the air, resonating in the cavernous space and wrapping around them like a warm blanket. As the choir sang, "O Holy Night," Emma felt a lump rise in her throat, overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment and the realization that Lucas had become a light in her life she hadn't known she needed. She turned to thank him, only to find him watching her with an expression so tender it made her heart ache. That night, as they stood beneath a street lamp, the snow falling softly around them, Lucas asked her why she'd stopped loving Christmas. Emma hesitated before admitting it had always reminded her of what she'd lost: family traditions abandoned, friendships faded, and a sense of wonder she couldn't seem to recapture. Lucas reached out, brushing a stray snowflake from her hair. "Maybe it's time to start making new memories," he said softly. Emma nodded, her chest tight with emotion, and as they parted ways, she realized she wasn't just rediscovering Christmas. She was rediscovering herself. Emma's days had taken on a new rhythm, each one punctuated by her growing connection with Lucas. Their time together felt effortless, as though the universe had conspired to bring them into each other's lives at just the right moment. But as Christmas drew closer, shadows began to creep into the edges of their otherwise luminous bond. One evening, after a particularly enchanting day spent skating on a frozen pond Lucas had discovered, Emma found herself hesitating when he asked her about her plans for Christmas Day. She deflected the question with a light-hearted comment about work, but Lucas caught the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. His own response to the topic was equally evasive, and for the first time, a faint wall seemed to rise between them. Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Lucas was holding something back. He often spoke of his travels and artistic endeavors, but when she tried to delve deeper into his personal life, his family, his roots, his answers were vague, his tone shifting to one of practiced charm. Similarly, Emma knew she wasn't being entirely honest either. She hadn't told Lucas about the lingering grief that had made her avoid Christmas for years, or how the loneliness she carried was a wound she hadn't yet learned to heal. Each of them wore a mask, afraid to let the other see the full truth. The tension came to a head on a snowy Friday evening. They had planned to meet at the Christmas market, but Lucas arrived late, looking distracted and unusually somber. When Emma asked him what was wrong, he brushed her off with a half-hearted excuse about a delayed meeting. Frustrated, Emma pressed him, and for the first time, Lucas snapped. "Why does it matter?" he said, his voice sharper than she'd ever heard it. "We're just two strangers enjoying a bit of Christmas magic, aren't we?" The words stung, and Emma recoiled, her heart sinking. "Is that all this is to you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lucas hesitated, clearly regretting his outburst, but before he could respond, Emma shook her head and turned away. "I don't have time for games," she said over her shoulder as she walked off, leaving him standing alone in the swirling snow. That night, Emma sat by her window, the ornament Lucas had given her on the first night resting in her palm. She replayed their argument in her mind, torn between anger and sadness. Deep down, she knew she had overreacted, but his dismissal had touched a raw nerve she hadn't realized was so close to the surface. Lucas, too, was struggling. Sitting in his rented studio, surrounded by half-finished ornaments and scattered sketches, he stared blankly at his phone, Emma's contact staring back at him. He wanted to call her to explain, but the words felt heavy, tangled with the weight of his own insecurities. The next day, they avoided the market entirely, both too stubborn and too uncertain to make the first move. Emma threw herself into work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Lucas. The way he made her laugh, the warmth of his presence, the way he'd looked at her that night in the chapel. Lucas, on the other hand, poured his frustration into his art, carving a delicate ornament shaped like a heart fractured down the middle. When he finished, he held it in his hands, wondering if he'd already ruined the best thing to happen to him in years. Days passed, the festive cheer of the city feeling muted to them both. The turning point came on Christmas Eve. Emma received an unexpected delivery, a small package wrapped in brown paper with her name scrawled across it in Lucas's familiar handwriting. Inside was the fractured heart ornament he had made, along with a handwritten note. "Emma," it read, "I've spent so much of my life running. From places, from people, and from feelings I was too scared to face. Meeting you has made me realize how tired I am of running. I know I've hurt you, and I hate that I've done that. If you'll let me, I'd like to start again. Not as strangers, but as two people who might just be better together than apart." Emma stared at the note, her heart pounding. She felt a flicker of hope, but also a lingering doubt. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? After a long moment, she picked up her phone and typed a single message. "Meet me at the market tonight. 8 p.m. The Christmas market was aglow with the warm light of lanterns and the shimmer of freshly fallen snow, but Emma hardly noticed as she weaved through the crowd, her heart racing. She had arrived early, her nerves urging her to walk the length of the market to steady herself. Lucas hadn't responded to her message, and every second of silence felt like an eternity. She glanced down at her phone one last time. Still nothing. A wave of doubt swept over her, but before it could settle, she looked up and saw him standing beneath the archway of twinkling fairy lights that marked the market's entrance. His breath formed soft clouds in the frigid air, and his hands were stuffed deep in his coat pockets, as though he were bracing himself against more than just the cold. Their eyes met across the crowd, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Lucas took a tentative step forward, then another, until he was standing in front of her. "You came," Emma said softly, her voice carrying both relief and vulnerability. Lucas nodded, his eyes searching hers. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," he admitted, his voice low. "But I couldn't let things end like that." Emma hesitated, her gaze dropping to the fractured heart ornament he had given her, which she clutched tightly in her gloved hand. "Neither could I," she said finally, her voice trembling. "But if we're going to do this, we need to be honest, with each other and with ourselves." Lucas took a deep breath, his expression serious. "You're right," he said, "and I want to start now." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small sketchbook, its edges worn from use. Handing it to her, he said, "This is me, Emma. Everything I've been too afraid to say out loud." Emma opened the sketchbook hesitantly, flipping through its pages. It was filled with drawings of places and faces, each one accompanied by small handwritten notes. Some were whimsical, like a sketch of a cafe with the note, "Best cinnamon rolls in Paris, ate 3 in one sitting." Others were deeply personal, like a portrait of an older man with a note, "Dad, who taught me everything I know about art, but not how to forgive." As she turned the pages, Emma realized she was looking at Lucas's life. His joys, his regrets, his hopes, and his fears, all laid bare. When she reached the final pages, she found sketches of the Christmas market, the chapel, and even herself, her laughter captured in delicate lines. The note beneath her portrait read, "The reason I believe in magic again." Emma's breath caught, and she looked up at Lucas, her eyes shining. "Why did you show me this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas stepped closer, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Because I want you to see me, the real me. And because I've realized that for the first time in my life, I don't want to run anymore. Not from this, and not from you." The sincerity in his words broke through the last of Emma's defenses. She closed the sketchbook and took a step closer, her heart pounding in her chest. "Then it's only fair I do the same," she said. Emma told Lucas about her parents' divorce, how it had splintered the family traditions she once held dear, and how she had buried herself in work to avoid confronting the emptiness it left behind. She spoke of the walls she had built around her heart, and how Lucas had somehow found a way through them. As she spoke, Lucas listened intently, his expression softening with every word. When she finished, he reached out and gently took her hand. "You've been carrying so much alone," he said. "You don't have to anymore." At that moment, the market's central clock began to chime, signaling the arrival of Christmas Day. Lucas turned to the small stage at the market center, where carolers had begun to sing. "Wait here," he said suddenly, his eyes lighting up with determination. Before Emma could protest, he disappeared into the crowd. Moments later, she saw him climb onto the stage, much to the confusion of the carolers. He whispered something to them, and after a brief pause, they stepped aside, allowing him to take the microphone. The crowd fell silent as Lucas looked out over the sea of faces, then directly at Emma. "This year, I came to this city thinking it would be just another stop in my journey," Lucas began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "But then I met someone who changed everything. Someone who reminded me what it feels like to be seen, to be understood, and to believe in something bigger than myself." The crowd murmured softly, and Emma felt her cheeks flush as all eyes turned toward her. Lucas continued, "Emma, you've made this the most magical Christmas of my life, and I don't want it to end. So, here, in front of all these witnesses, I'm asking if you'll give us a chance to see where this can go." Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Lucas stepped down from the stage and approached her, his expression hopeful but uncertain. "What do you say?" he asked softly. Emma didn't hesitate. She closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." As the cheers and applause faded into the background, Emma and Lucas remained in each other's embrace, their world reduced to the warmth between them and the promise of what lay ahead. The carolers began singing again, their voices rising in a joyous rendition of Silent Night, and for the first time in years, Emma truly felt the peace the song described. Lucas pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his hands still resting gently on her arms. "I meant every word," he said softly. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know it's brighter with you in it." Emma smiled, a mix of relief and joy washing over her. "I believe you," she said, "and I'm ready to stop running too." The crowd began to disperse, but the two of them stayed in the market for a while longer, strolling hand in hand beneath the twinkling lights. The tension and uncertainty that had clouded the past few days were gone, replaced by a sense of calm and hope. Lucas led Emma to a quiet corner of the market where a small bonfire crackled, its warmth a welcome reprieve from the cold night. They sat together on a wooden bench, sharing a cup of spiced cider and watching as snowflakes drifted lazily through the air. For the first time, Emma opened up about the pain of losing the traditions she'd once cherished and how she'd convinced herself that focusing on work was the only way to fill the void. "I guess I thought if I stayed busy enough, I wouldn't have to feel anything," she admitted. Lucas listened without interruption, his hand warm around hers. "I get that," he said after a moment. "For me, it was about staying in motion. If I didn't stop moving, city to city, project to project, I wouldn't have to face the things I left behind." He hesitated before adding, "My dad and I had a falling out years ago, and I've been too stubborn to go back and fix it. But meeting you has made me realize I don't want to keep running from the people I care about. You've shown me that it's never too late to start again." His words resonated deeply with Emma, and she felt a spark of courage ignite within her. "Maybe we can help each other stop running," she said, her voice steady. "Together." The next day, Christmas morning, Lucas surprised Emma with an invitation to his small studio, where he had transformed the space into a winter wonderland. Strings of lights crisscrossed the ceiling, handmade ornaments adorned a tiny tree, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and cinnamon. "It's not much," he said, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly, "but I wanted to give you a Christmas to remember." Emma was speechless, her heart swelling as she took in the care and thoughtfulness behind every detail. "It's perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." They spent the morning sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Lucas showed Emma more of his artwork, including a new piece he had started, a watercolor of the two of them walking through the market. "It's not finished yet," he said, "but I think it's already my favorite." Emma smiled, touched by how he had captured the moment they first truly connected. "I think it's my favorite too," she said. In the afternoon, Lucas surprised her again. "There's one more thing I want to do," he said, taking her hand. They walked to the old chapel where the choir had rehearsed, and Lucas explained that he had arranged for them to attend the Christmas service. "It's not about religion for me," he said. "It's about tradition, about finding peace and connection in the things that matter." As they sat together, the choir's voices rose in harmony, and Emma felt a deep sense of belonging, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. She leaned her head against Lucas's shoulder, grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. As the day turned to evening, Emma made a decision. "There's someone I want you to meet," she said, her voice tinged with nervous anticipation. Lucas looked at her curiously but nodded. They took a cab to the outskirts of the city, where Emma's mother lived in a modest home decorated with simple but heartfelt Christmas lights. "I haven't been here for Christmas in years," Emma admitted as they approached the door. "But it feels right this time." Her mother answered the door, her face lighting up with surprise and joy. "Emma!" she exclaimed, pulling her daughter into a warm embrace. Emma introduced Lucas, who charmed her mother with his warmth and humor. The three of them spent the evening sharing stories, eating homemade cookies, and decorating the tree. For Emma, it was a bittersweet reminder of the Christmases she used to love, but it was also a sign of new beginnings. As the night came to an end, her mother hugged her tightly. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "I've missed this." Emma nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Me too, Mom," she said. Later, as she and Lucas walked back to the cab, Emma felt a deep sense of contentment. "Thank you for pushing me to face my fears," she said, squeezing his hand. Lucas smiled, his eyes full of affection. "Thank you for letting me be part of your story," he replied. The week following Christmas was a blend of new beginnings and quiet reflection for Emma and Lucas. The city seemed to glow brighter, as if sharing their newfound joy. They spent their days exploring the places they had once visited alone, now infused with shared laughter and a sense of belonging. On New Year's Eve, Lucas invited Emma to a small gathering at the studio with a few friends he had made during his time in the city. It was a cozy affair, filled with music, laughter, and the hum of creative energy. As the countdown to midnight began, Lucas stood beside Emma, holding her hand. "This time last year, I was sitting in a cafe in Prague, wondering where I'd end up next," he said, his voice thoughtful. "I never imagined it would be here, with you." Emma smiled, her heart full. "And I never imagined I'd find someone who'd make me want to believe in Christmas again," she replied. When the clock struck midnight, their first kiss of the new year was met with cheers and clinking glasses from the group around them. As January unfolded, Lucas found himself at a crossroads. His original plan had been to leave the city after the holidays and move on to his next destination. But now, the thought of leaving Emma felt impossible. One snowy evening, as they walked through the park where they had first skated together, he broached the subject. "I've been thinking," he began, his tone tentative. "I came here planning to keep moving, but I don't want to anymore. Not if it means leaving you." Emma stopped, her breath visible in the cold air. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice tinged with both hope and uncertainty. Lucas nodded, his expression earnest. "I'm sure. This city feels like home now." "You feel like home." They decided to take the leap together, navigating the challenges of blending their lives. Lucas found a permanent studio space in the city, where he continued to create and sell his art, while Emma began to reimagine her career, taking on projects that allowed her more freedom to explore her passions. They became each other's greatest supporters, encouraging one another to chase their dreams while building a life that felt rich with love and purpose. Spring arrived, and with it, new traditions. One sunny afternoon, Lucas invited Emma to a local fair, where he surprised her by setting up a booth to showcase his art. To Emma's delight, the centerpiece of his display was the watercolor he had started on Christmas morning, now completed and titled The Gift of Us. It drew countless admirers, and Lucas beamed with pride every time Emma spoke about its meaning to potential buyers. "It's not for sale," he told them all with a smile. "This one's staying with us." The seasons turned, and by the time summer arrived, they had fallen into an easy rhythm of shared routines and spontaneous adventures. Their love deepened, not in grand gestures, but in the small, everyday moments. The way Lucas would leave sketches for Emma to find in her planner, or how Emma would surprise him with his favorite coffee on busy workdays. They learned to navigate their differences and found strength in their shared values, their relationship becoming a partnership rooted in mutual respect and understanding. As autumn gave way to winter, Emma found herself looking forward to Christmas for the first time in years. She and Lucas spent weeks planning their holiday, filling their apartment with decorations, baking cookies, and even hosting a small tree-trimming party for friends. On Christmas Eve, they returned to the chapel where their story had truly begun. The same choir was performing, and as their voices filled the sacred space, Emma felt a profound sense of gratitude. After the service, Lucas led her outside, where the snow fell in soft, quiet flakes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, his breath visible in the cold night air. "Emma," he began, his voice steady despite the nervous energy in his eyes. "This past year has been the best of my life, and it's because of you. You've shown me what it means to love and be loved, to face fears and embrace joy. I don't want to imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Emma's breath caught, her heart racing. She looked at Lucas, at the hope and love in his eyes, and felt her own heart answer before her words did. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. 1,000 times yes. Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced, their joy radiating like the glow of the Christmas lights around them. Their engagement became the talk of their friends and community, and as they planned their future, they made a promise to one another. Every Christmas would be a celebration of not only their love, but also the courage it took to find it. The next year, as they stood hand in hand at the market where their story had truly begun, they knew they had created something rare and beautiful. A love born of second chances, shared dreams, and the quiet magic of believing in possibilities. And so, with the city as their witness and the season's magic as their guide, Emma and Lucas began a new chapter in their lives, knowing that together, they could face whatever came their way.